Welcome to this explainer. Let me ask you a quick question. How do you actually define your reality? Are you basically an isolated individual navigating the world on your own, or are you entirely defined by the people around you? Today we're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey to explore how humanity has historically answered the absolute most fundamental questions of existence. We are going to look at these massive, complex ideas through wildly different global lenses, really explaining the philosophical visions that have shaped cultures all across the world. From the hyper-rational individual to the deeply intertwined community, we're going to unpack the whole shebang. Okay, let's dive into this.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today. We'll kick things off with the quest for wisdom, move right into the Western rational vision, explore the African communitarian vision, look at the liberation vision, dive into dynamic and holistic visions, and finally, synthesize our global reality. Let's get started.
Section 1. The Quest for Wisdom, Philosophy as a Global Human Enterprise. To really get a grip on these distinct visions, we first have to take a step back and look at the meta-pursuit of philosophy itself. Like, what exactly are we doing when we engage in this global human enterprise?
Well, philosophy isn't just about collecting empirical facts like you might do in a laboratory. It operates as a second-order meta-reflection. In simple terms, it's not about looking at the things under the microscope. It's asking why we built the microscope in the first place, right? Think about it. From the ancient Greeks trying to figure out the unifying principle of the cosmos, all the way to today's naturalism, philosophy is the rigorous effort to see how literally everything hangs together. It questions the very boundaries of our knowledge, testing the logical structures of science, society, and morality. Section 2. The Western Rational Vision, the Autonomous Individual. Let's see how this builds our first major paradigm. The Western tradition has long been defined by a heavy focus on the rational, autonomous individual. It's a vision where reason is absolutely king.
And honestly, no one exemplifies this quite like the 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant pulled off this ingenious, almost Copernicus-like revolution in thought. See, during the Enlightenment, modern science really threatened the idea of human freedom and morality. Because if the universe is just a giant machine of cause and effect, well, how can we possibly be free? Kant solved this by placing human autonomy at the absolute center of everything. He argued that our human understanding actually structures the laws of nature as we experience them, and that our own human reason autonomously dictates our moral laws. So we literally construct our world of experience and our realm of morality through our own autonomous faculties. It's a real game changer.
And this whole idea brilliantly illustrates a broader trend in early modern Western thought, which is the complete elevation of the mind over the physical body. Take Anton Wilhelm Amo, for instance. He was an early modern philosopher inspired by Descartes. Amo argued for what we call strict substance dualism, essentially the idea that the mind and body are entirely different materials altogether. He claimed that the human mind is a purely active spirit, totally distinct from the body, which just passively experiences sensations. And because the mind is spiritual and active, reason is highly privileged over bodily sensation. It's the ultimate elevation of the isolated, rational intellect.
Section 3. The African communitarian vision. We are, therefore I am. But what happens when we look outside that Western framework? We are taking a sharp pivot away from Western individualism right now to explore the rich, incredibly socially grounded philosophies of the African continent. Here, the focus shifts entirely from the I to the we.
This brings us to a foundational concept in Southern African thought, Ubuntu or Hunu. It literally translates to a person is a person through other persons. This completely reimagines existence. You aren't just an isolated mind floating out there in space. Your very humanity is dependent on affirming, preserving, and appreciating the humanity of others in your community. You only become a person by interacting with other persons.
Think about Descartes' famous individualistic statement, I think, therefore I am. My existence is proven by my isolated rationality. But then contrast that with African philosopher John S. Pabi, who offers this radical counterstatement. I am related by blood, therefore I exist. It is completely mind-blowing when you put them side by side. Being, in this African vision, is fundamentally relational. Now, think about how obsessed we are with drawing borders today. Contrast that with this beautiful Akan maxim from Ghana, humanity has no boundary. It literally translates to, in human flesh, there is no edge of cultivation. While a farmer obviously has to stop at the boundary of their field, the cultivation of human fellowship is totally limitless. It asserts this incredible ethic of universal brotherhood, recognizing that all humankind is one single species sharing the exact same basic hopes, desires, and dignity.
Because of this deep social orientation,
Ethics in African philosophy is laser-focused on how we treat one another. Look at this across various African languages. Akan, Yoruba, Ive, Shona. The word for ethics or morality is almost always a direct translation of the word for character. A bad person is simply someone with bad character. Good character is the absolute linchpin of their ethical systems, and it's formed through habits and actions that promote social harmony. Here's a really fascinating distinction, though. While traditional African cultures are pervasively religious, their ethical systems are fundamentally humanistic and autonomous. Morality actually isn't dictated by divine revelation or supernatural commands. Instead, morality originates from natural, rational reflections on community welfare and the common good. If an action builds up society, it's good. If it tears it down, it's bad. It's an ethics rooted entirely in our shared human experience.
Section 4. The Liberation Vision. Decentering the West. Let's transition over to Latin American and post-colonial thought. In this paradigm, the very act of doing philosophy becomes a tool for liberation, challenging historical hegemony and actively decentering Western dominance.
We start with a really provocative question posed by the Peruvian thinker Augusto Salazar Bondy. Does a philosophy of our America exist? Bondy argued that you can't just copy-paste European philosophy and call it authentic to Latin America. Actually, he maintained that true, authentic philosophy in Latin America is practically impossible as long as the region remains trapped in economic underdevelopment and cultural dependence on the West. Basically, liberation from economic domination is the mandatory prerequisite for authentic thought.
So, doing philosophy in this context requires a total perspective shift. Thinkers like Enrique Dussel developed what he calls the analectrical method. It literally shifts the center of gravity. Dussel's method demands that we stop looking from the top down and start actually listening to the globally excluded from the bottom up. Instead of looking at global progress strictly through the lens of European success, it shifts the philosophical focus away from the powerful and directly onto the marginalized.
You see this focus on the excluded powerfully echoed in post-colonial feminism too. Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak asks this famous question about the subaltern, meaning the people who are socially, politically, and geographically outside the power structures. Can the subaltern speak? She critiques Western paradigms, even the super-progressive ones like French post-structuralism, pointing out that they often rely on the very categories of universal subjectivity and reason that secretly deny the capacity for resistance to non-Western people. The Western subject kind of sets itself up as the only subject capable of true reason.
Postcolonial thinkers take this even further, deconstructing the way language and history have been violently grouped together. Thinkers like Walter Mignolo excavate the very term Latin America just to show its colonial foundations. They challenge the automatic alignment of the West with concepts like modernity and progress, and they strongly warn against fetishizing the non-Western subject into some simplistic, homogeneous category. It's a vision entirely dedicated to unmasking power dynamics in how we think and speak.
Section 5. Dynamic and Holistic Visions. The Universe as Process. Moving on, we explore indigenous visions that offer a totally different metaphysical reality. Here, the universe isn't some collection of static objects, but a continuous flowing process.
Take a look at the Aztec, or Nahua, concept of teotl. For the Aztecs, reality wasn't a noun at all. It was a verb. Teotl is an active, self-transforming cosmos. They viewed the world as a dialectical polar monism. So think of it kind of like a cosmic tug-of-war where contrary forces are always in this slipping, dynamic tension. The cosmos was poetically described as a house of paintings, beautiful, constantly changing, and inherently unstable.
And honestly, if you live in a slippery, constantly shifting cosmos, how do you even behave? Well, in this vision, ethics is entirely about maintaining balance. It requires moderation. You have to actively construct a wise face and a strong heart just to navigate this unstable reality without falling off the edge. It's essentially the ultimate guide to cosmic surfing, a remarkably practical ethics born from a profoundly fluid worldview.
Section 6. Synthesizing our global reality, the thread of humanism. We've covered an incredible amount of ground today, from Kantian autonomy all the way to Aztec process philosophy. Let's bring this explainer to a close by synthesizing these global realities and finding the common threads. Despite their massive differences, the unifying power of philosophy remains its ability to foster human hope in dialogue. And these aren't just abstract ideas, they solve real-world problems.
For instance, the communitarian philosophy of Ubuntu we talked about, that was the crucial ingredient that guided South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, allowing a whole nation to choose forgiveness over retribution. Whether we use the analytic precision of the West or the liberating critiques of the Global South, these distinct visions give us the necessary lenses to interpret our shared, messy human experience.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought. Is your reality a collection of isolated objects, or is it an active shared process? Which of these global philosophical visions best describes the default programming of your own life? Take a moment to ponder that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.